Alrighty, guys. I've basically had a little rest because I don't like just rushing out content just for the sake of it, right? I know the idea is be first, get the most clicks and stuff like that, and that's always the way I see a lot of streamers do it, stuff like that. I like to take a second to think about it, to sleep on it when you're not all heat of the moment kind of stuff. Obviously, if you watch the VOD, I get into it. I like to be animated and fucking fuck this, fuck that. Really, really fun to me, right? But ultimately, I want to do a calm presentation of my thoughts after I've had a chance to think about it rather than rush out a video, right? That's the way I like to think about it. That's the way I wish streamers would do it. Sometimes they got good takes. Most of them are shit though, because they're all like blood impulse, get the video out as fast as possible. Just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. Anyway, I want to give you more of a broad outline rather than, oh my god, let's talk about my build. Let's talk about this, and oh my god, this one got nerfed, so now I'm the number one position. I don't really care. I want to talk about broad picture here, what this means, and just like the big take home and a grand scale kind of thing, right? So, hit-based spellcasting, too little damage, too few defenses, and crappy mobility options when compared to things like traps, totems, mines, triggers, damage over time, right? True. True. Actually, all true. Pretty good breakdown here, although it doesn't quite tell the whole story. So, why did they have too lower damage when you think about it when it comes to something like totems? I guess the TLDR here is that you also get access to totem nodes. Totem nodes are more efficient. It also means you get better choices of cluster jewels and stuff like that. Basically, the TLDR, right, is when you're using a spell, because that's what a majority of these are, right? They're spells, and they're used with something like totems, you get better scalability because there's more options available to you, and sometimes better pathing on the tree, more efficient. Whereas if you've got a lightning skill, I mean, obviously it's a spell, so you can go grab the spell damage nodes, but it always seems to line up that basically by the time you get the lightning damage, right? So the same nodes I could grab as well, and I can go grab like a totem node and make a more efficient tree. By the time you go run to the other side of the skill tree and grab the lightning damage nodes over there, or maybe grab two spell ones on the way through, you often end up with less damage than me. So we do start from the same gem, but by the time you start adding in things like the fact that you get two totems, even at like a 20% loss, it still ends up being two totems, right? It's definitely a damage increase. The TLDR here, right, or what I'm trying to get at, is it's always more efficient to use them because you have more scaling options when you use them in totems, traps, and mines, and triggered skills, right? That's kind of why they say the damage is too little, despite the fact that it comes from the same gem, right? The far too defensive thing is basically the result of what we just finished talking about, right? Because your damage is significantly worse when you're just using the gem links and a subpar tree, because you're forced to do that. You are forced to go grab additional nodes to make up for the difference in not having better scaling options like myself, right? So when you do that, you sacrifice things like life, things like potentially mana reserves, so you can't fit as many auras, and you will end up going a glass cannon because you will deliberately skip defensive options to make up for your too little damage because you have a subpar tree, right? So kind of these two are synonymous with each other, where it just made more sense to get more damage rather than try and balance them out and have shitty damage overall, right? Mobility options is something completely different. This is a mechanical issue, right? Where it is you are locked in place whenever you are hand casting, right? And the one thing I want to mention here, because I'm trying to skip through this as quick as possible, right, is that this issue does not get addressed, okay? A lot of people are excited about hand casting. Hand casting has 100% been improved. So GGG completely succeeded in this, but I want to mention how this actually looks on paper, right? So when you think about it like this, if my damage issues just got solved and now I can do slightly better pathing, right? So I don't need to go to these extra spell damage nodes and I can try and make my tree a little bit neater because I'm not so reliant on it. That means that you're going to invest those points instead of going back to that damage into defensive layers. So you're roughly where you were at the start, right? Because back in the day, you would use these extra damage nodes to catch up to something like traps, totems, and mines, right? To catch up to them. Now that you have that by default, those points that you think you're going to get ahead with will actually bring you back because they will be spent on defenses like everyone else. So you're not going to be superseding these in damage. You'll probably be more balanced out or more in line with them as a way to think of it, right? You will not end up... You could, but then you're going to have the same problem that they all run into, which is standing still with no defensive layers is significantly worse than, like, a lot of other things, okay? So, you will not be getting more damage. You will basically be spending that extra damage you've now gained into defensive layers. So you're going to be on par with these, okay? And then the mobility thing does not change. That's the way I want you to think about this, right? Because traps and mines and totems, that sort of stuff got nerfed, right? But they're still going from above you to now more in line with you, and the damage to the skill brings them back up, and then straight back to where they were. So imagine you guys basically have the same damage now. The good way of looking at this is basically you have the same damage now, except for you still do not have the mobility. It's worth mentioning you still do not have the mobility, right? So you're probably going to need better defensive layers also. Because these other skills can sometimes just flick, move, flick, move, flick, move, and get out 8 shots at once, right? Because you throw down 3 totems, 3 mines at once as you're moving, and they auto-target, right? Whereas your ass is going to be hand casting and, you know, trying to aim, and you'll still be dodging and moving, right? So you just don't have that burst potential like some of these do. Or totems are going to constantly fire while you're going to be putting down a damage while you can, and then moving, and then trying to put down damage when you can, which will actually still be a net loss of damage. Right? I'm probably not doing a very good job describing this, but for all the damage you're about to gain, you will lose it in playstyle, okay? I don't want to oversell people this. I don't want to undersell it either. I think these are fantastic changes. They're very much needed to close the gap. But the main issue still remains, which is mechanical, right? And this will never change. I really want to specify this to GGG here. Stop trying to change this. This is unchangeable, right? This is forever going to be like the argument of ranged versus melee. I could have 0 defensive layers on a ranged character, and it still perform better in maps than a character that is melee that has a single target only ability. Because even if you've got better damage than me, I'm going to clear the map 8 times faster than you. That will not change. I will always be able to screen wide AoE. The only way to do that is to gut ranged itself, and then we're all just playing melee. So then there's no point, right? Like, these are fundamental differences in the way the skill interacts with the game. Mechanical, right? Whatever way you want to look at it. This will never change. So, the downtime, right? The downtime that you have on these abilities does take away from the damage. POB won't show this, but you will notice this. Right? When you're playing the Feared, when you're doing Sim 30s, right? You will be trying to position yourself not to get completely smashed. When you are doing that, you are not dealing damage. Whereas my cast on crit character will still be spinning, dealing damage, and dodging all at the same time. So if you had 10 mil more damage than me, right? But you have half the uptime, you've got fucking, you know, half the damage now. So imagine like this, right? You have 30 mil damage, I have 20 mil. My 20 mil is constant as I spin around the map. But you're spending most of your time, even if it's just half of the time, right? Positioning yourself to try and get your damage out, right? You have 30, it's actually 15, and I've got 20 consistent. That is a huge difference, and also, my defensive layers are twice as effective because I'm dodging along with the defensive layer as well. So not only do we both have the same amount of armor, I'm moving and manually dodging while you're occasionally taking more hits than me. You know what I mean? Like, these things do matter in the grand scheme of things. So, this definitely helps balance out the damage issue and allows you to get defenses. You do not have better defenses or anything like that, most likely. I'm sure there are a couple of winners and losers in this, but the mobility thing never changes, okay? So I would argue in the endgame, you're still going to see lots of traps, totems, mines, and triggered skills and damage over time because they function better, okay? They function better than hand casting. Having more damage will not really fix this problem, okay? Also, even the damage amount, we had this damage before and it still sucked, right? Remember, prior to this, support gems were got nerfed. So this was game-wide 50% less damage on some builds or whatever, 40 to 60. Sounds about what we had before. Even before, handcast skills still sucked ass and couldn't do most content. And it was also still the worst choice. So if our damages are now equal, right? Like you've got this extra damage bonus, that just means you're on par with me. And then the mechanical difference will really show itself. Okay, so you're capable of getting the same damage and defense as me, but you will never be me, okay? So I don't really think this changes the meta that much. It definitely adds some variety, which is great. And it definitely is going to make some players feel like they can level with some different skills. I think they really, really succeeded. They have brought up hit-based spellcasting. But I really don't think that your endgame is going to change that much when these are some of the better feeling skills, right? How many times have people tried to make Cyclone work? Cyclone is a garbage skill on its own. Like physical Cyclone scaling is tremendously shit for the amount invested. People still love to play it. Why? It feels better to play. This is going to be true for traps, totems, mines, and triggered skills and damage over time. They feel better to play, this won't change, and they definitely have an endgame advantage where things like this are going to drop off heavily in Simulacrum. Being locked in place is the issue. Cannot actually change this at all, okay? I'm just going to mention that. Some of the weird things here, saying Ice Spear needed improvements for single target. I'm assuming they're only referring to hand casting because Ice Spear has some of the most busted single target in the game. Crazy that this was on there. Winners and losers, things like cleave and heavy strike, obviously got nerfed here and stuff like that, guys. Not a big deal. Every patch has winners, losers. You'll get over it. A couple things I want to mention. Things like the cast speed and hit-based bow attacks, right? I'm going to try and punch through this, guys. I know you guys don't like really brief explanations here, but it's bigger picture here. A lot of these local added modifiers and stuff like that, increasing the strength of some of the earlier modifiers, will definitely help alleviate the problem and stuff like that, right? It is worth mentioning that only certain gems are going to get bonuses here, right? And they will not be adding flat bonus to all the gems that are bows, right? So what they really mean when they say this, right, is, right? So here's some of the improvements that they made to rares and stuff like that. You have to get this gear to get the benefit of it, right? This is not free damage. Just like saying there's more cast speed obtainable, right? Just by saying there's more cast speed obtainable does not actually mean that there is more cast speed on your character by default. Saying that there's another tier 1 role doesn't mean shit for like budget league starters. It only matters for the top 1% that are going to get that role, okay? So I really want to preface this by saying that pretty much all the changes to bows here might help out with budgets, right? So you go from 100x budget for all tier 1 roles. It'll probably be like 150 this league for all tier 1 roles, especially if there's hype behind it, right? Because now the tier 1 roles are better. But what they are saying, though, is that they did improve the lower level versions of it, too. So like a tier 3 role gets a 60% increase. That's definitely going to help, man. That means you can use a tier 3 role and it not feel as bad as it did before. But you still need to have the gear for any of this to take effect, right? So I'll mention this even with things like, in my own case, the Toxic Rain change, right? Toxic Rain received a nerf, and then everyone's all like, it doesn't matter though, man, because obviously you get it back in gear. That hurts the budget version, okay? That means that until I get the Broadhead Arrow Quiver, which I guarantee you people make me pay more for a Hunter version, I don't get that extra damage. So, you know, I want to specify this, right? It's still a nerf, okay? It is still a nerf, regardless of if I can make up for some of that damage. Okay, so they're like, oh man, it doesn't matter. It's still a nerf. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because Toxic Rain is still going to outclass 90% of the skills just in general. But it is worth mentioning that it did get nerfed, okay? It did get nerfed, and you can make up for it on gear, but by sheerly having to invest in gear, it does hurt the budget of it, right? Because now you're going to want a Broadhead Arrow Quiver with this implicit before you go and fucking say you've got like a perfect one or whatever. I did a terrible job describing that, but the TLDR here, guys, is without the gear, you're not really going to see the benefit of these changes. So it may lower the budget, it may make less gear acceptable. It will probably not be like, oh, I can now just grab a shit skill and just run through the game. It would probably help a little bit, but I'm just saying, guys, that like this will not be free damage. Hydrosphere got gutted. Good riddance to bad rubbish, man. I warned people about this with that Flicker Strike thing, right? Where I'm like, look, this Flicker Strike character needs Totems and needs Hydrosphere for this to work. If either of these two things are not up, you have shit damage. Well, Hydrosphere just got deleted. So basically, so did that build, and so did a shitload of builds that needed this interaction. I say good riddance to bad rubbish. This mechanic is shit. I don't like 90% of mechanics that basically just double your damage, right, through one small interaction. Because I basically think of it as abusive, right? It's like, it's indicative of a problem. If you need to double your damage and then double your damage again just to make 5 mil, that's indicative of having shit damage, okay? That should be your biggest hint that something's not right with the scaling of the skill, okay? So the second I saw like 10 mil damage in POB, right? But I'm using totems and I'm using shit. This is for all melee skills, by the way. This is why Cyclone actually sucks to play. If ever my stuff isn't up, and I can't always guarantee that it's always up, I notice that I have 0 damage, just like a Bottled Faith character, right? There are a couple of characters out there, in particular melee, okay, so I'll mention this, where I unclick just their flask and I lose half my damage. I'll go from 30 mil straight down to like 18 and 15 and shit, just from turning off flask. Then I turn off totems and it halves again. Then I take away the Paradoxica and it halves again. Then I take off Hydrosphere and it halves again. And then I'm down to like 1 mil damage, and people are like, man, why does my build feel so inconsistent? God forbid any map mods get thrown in there, right? And then people wonder why I call these builds shit despite having 30 mil damage. I'm like, they're 30 mil conditional damage. You know what I mean? It's not the same as like, I can turn off everything and still have 20. It is nowhere near the same, okay? So I just want to preface this by saying, always be wary of builds that have to constantly double their damage and rely on these broken mechanics, because it is an indicator of shit damage in the first place. You know what I mean? The best thing to rely on is things that have decent damage without any setup. That's the kind of build I like. People wonder why I keep pointing out their setups going, hey, why do you keep taking away my fucking Frostbomb? I do it to show you that you still have damage with or without these things, okay? If you constantly need them, you need to factor in the amount of time it would take you to put these things down, press these 8 buttons to then get your said 2 mil damage, because technically, you would have to take some of that damage away for the amount of time it takes to press the button. POB is a calculator that's always giving you the perfect scenario, as if you just pressed one button and all these things happen simultaneously, and then you have perfect stacks, perfect fucking Frostbomb, you got all your early weaknesses up and they never drop off or anything like that. There's no such thing as immune phases, there's no such thing as bosses standing on degens, which is just not realistic of any in-game play, right? None of this shit is realistic or works in-game. That's why POB is shit, right? We have to use it, but I'm just letting you know that damage like this is always indicative of a much larger problem. Figure marks. Okay, I'm going to try and punch this as quick as possible. This is actually a nerf. A lot of people are happy about this. I would say it's not a big deal. This is more cast on crit specific and stuff like that and a bunch of other builds. But losing them off the rings is kind of the big deal here for me, because this thing being automated was massive quality of life. Massive quality of life, right? So things for Assassin's Mark. This is really, really powerful for cast on crit. So losing this was a nerf to cast on crit. Okay, a lot of people maybe like no one's talked about it, but this is annoying when you do need. Obviously, you don't always need this, but like a lot of us, right, use this trigger on use the mark skill to finish up our crit cap, because I don't necessarily need good crit when it comes to white mobs. So long as I touch them once and it crits once, pretty much blows up a white pack. This does matter on bosses where I need 100% crit, 100% hit at all times kind of thing. So sometimes I'll have like 80%, 89% crit, and then I let Assassin's Mark do the rest of it. Now, obviously, people are like, oh, this is permanent, but it takes away my automation. It takes away my fun. Still don't know the definition of permanent yet. Does it, persist through phases? And now I have to have it on my links, right? So I've lost a link off my build, which sometimes I'm quite starved on. And now I have to press a button, which, yet again, some people care, some people don't. I play cast on crit because I like automation. I love automation, right? I can always count on it. I will not be using any marks while I'm mapping. I'll use it for map bosses and actual bosses. That's it. So it's kind of this annoying thing that I got to keep in the back of my mind, where it's like, most of the time I'm playing the game with my hand on my dick. Feels great. And then, whenever there's a rare mob, it was automatically being put on. Now I have to self-cast it. I'm not going to do this. This technically hurts budget versions more, because now you've lost automation, or it hurts the mid-tier more. And it definitely hurts the top tier, because top tier don't even want to press these things. So, kind of annoying. Kind of annoying that we don't know the definition of permanent yet. Does help our budget versions. I do not understand the mark on hit trigger support thing, right? Because obviously it's now the condition is that it has to be an attack, which is whatever. But why would I ever waste 3 links, right? So I have the attack skill I'm going to use it with, the mark on hit plus this, when I could just press the curse if the curse is permanent. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, unless I'm putting 2 marks down, or there's some reason to really, really use this, why would I waste 3 to 4 links to do this when I could just press the button once? And then I would need something to automate whatever I'm using this to trigger the mark on things. So basically, Asenath's Chant again, or the Maloney's, whatever you call it, right? Like, and it has to do an attack-based thing, right? It can't be a skill, because it says it needs to be an attack. So technically, this is a nerf overall to automation. Marks don't really change. So really, this kind of just annoys me for cast on crit. So super weird. I don't really like this change. It's whatever. I guess to some people, it's like a small quality of life in the early game, and then by end game, you're probably going to wish you still had Assassin's Mark on hit. Whatever. Don't really care. Take that however you see, right? Skill balance, detonate dead, practically untouched. I am expecting this is not the full story, right? I'm expecting this to not actually be the full story. Wait till patch notes, guys. Wait till patch notes. Same thing with seismic change, seismic trap. I don't think this is the end. I do think that they will hold back and not have a repeat of 3.16 or whatever it is, or 3.15, wherever they were like, oh yeah, here's the cliff notes, right? Yeah, we got you. And then the patch notes come out and you're like, what the fuck? What the fuck? I'm expecting them not to do that again, so I think a lot of things are going to persist through. Toxic Rain, nerfed it by 20%. Yet again, people are getting excited about the gear, giving it back. If you don't have the gear, you're not getting it back, so it is a 20% nerf. It is a 20% nerf. Now you need slightly better gear to get back that damage. That gear could have been used for quality of life or defenses, right? Whatever. Think of that how you will. It will still be a top tier league starter. I will also add, there is a third version. I don't really want to make it because I think it's due to get nerfed, hopefully after this. But basically, Pathfinder with the fragility, you know, basically the one where you get it on Hitman, can then basically become like a feedback loop of basically permanent recovery on Flask. You get a whole bunch of fragilities, so you can get like an armor version where you're quite tanky against armor hits and stuff like that, already quite popular. Then you get the benefits of Pathfinder speed, Pathfinder permanent Flask, and then you basically have automated heal where like as you're getting hit, your Flask are popping. Your Flask pop and you get 6% life back. There's, what is it? There's 4 of them or 5 of them that can do this. So it's basically like permanent 30% life back whenever you get fucking hit, along with the benefit of being the Pathfinder, which is just as quick and just as much damage. And because the Flask are permanent and automated, this thing's quite crazy. I mean, obviously this doesn't work if you don't have the Flask, but I am saying that there's definitely a Pathfinder variant that is incredibly strong, along with Radar, which is better for clear and better for early game damage, and then Champion, more new player friendly. So yeah, both of these are, all 3 of these versions are quite crazy. Toxic Rain did not really get dethroned or whatever you want to call it, right? It is still a massive league starter by comparison to other shit. Still got better damage too, by the way. You can chop 20% off the build, and it doesn't make a fucking difference. Because it literally still has more damage than most builds. Is what it is, man. March of the Legion, good riddance to bad rubbish. Strength, armor stacker, you'll be missed. That's pretty much the only one to die from that. Supreme Ego and shit, we'll wait to see how they see. Slight buff to MOM, but MOM still has the problem of obviously needing the insane amounts of mana regen to make it not feel like shit with Agnostic. Agnostic being its best defensive player. This is kind of nice. It's kind of nice. Yet again, where you get the damage links, you still need gear, so it's not really too big on the League Star thing. I'm sure some version will come out where someone will say, you know, there's some sort of new budget thing here, but to me, typically, you still need a lot of the mana stuff. Still want to Pledge of the Hands. You know, anything that gives mana basically is really, really good. Which I think Pledge of the Hands doesn't even have it anymore. It's still got hit from last time. Archmage is no better, so I don't know why people are going on about that. Must have missed something. Immunity builds, dead. Good riddance. Good riddance. Dancing Dervish, kind of cool. Don't really care. Not really a massive build. Void Fletcher, still don't know the exact numbers, but yeah. It's kind of hit the budget in one way, but I guess we'll never really know about, like, budget is always relative to player base. We've been going on for 22 minutes here. Take-home piece, right? The take-home piece here that I want to go over is just be aware. Everything they said is technically correct, right? They definitely have helped out hit-based bow builds, but a lot of it is going to be on gear. Can't get the gear, you're not receiving too much help, right? You're definitely receiving some, okay? It's not all bad, it's not all doom and gloom. I do just want to mention that, you know, some of your stuff, like Hydrosphere interactions for some of these characters, and obviously your sources of added damage, which were very, very important early on, right? So basically, what these do is they alleviate the need for good gear early. So like, when there's low flat damage on gear, so like basically 4 bow characters, because you've got added effectiveness of damage, and if you don't get a good weapon, you don't get that. That's where, ironically, added Cold, Lightning, and Chaos were actually really, really good. I'm assuming that got nerfed because they've got some way of, you know, they're going to help out the tiers and stuff like that. So these will be much better to level with now. And while they scale, I would still imagine that just like everything else, they're planning on dropping off in yellow maps. And you will not get the added benefit of all this crazy shit unless you've got the rolls on gear. Which still means that you will have to increase your budget, right? So you're going to go from a 100x build, and then you're going to spend all that money to get the same damage, but you will have access to defenses, okay? Don't get too crazy excited if you can't, if you're not good at accumulating gear. I still don't really recommend a lot of these as league starters, because you still do have some responsibility here to get good gear to make these new changes actually affect your build, right? Like, you're not getting a tier 1 roll in your quiver for free. You have to get that roll first, okay? That's like the take-home piece here is, not a lot of this stuff, including the cast speed and shit like that, is actually free. It's not on the tree, it's not anything like that. Gems got a buff, bunch of less multipliers got added to close the gap, so we roughly end up same way we were, but hit spells got increased. The rest of, like, all the added damage effectiveness and stuff like that requires it on gear, okay, guys? That's kind of like the take-home piece here. If you don't have the gear, you're not really seeing a great deal of these benefits. So just keep that in mind when you get, like, super overhyped and stuff like that. There are some winners out there that just straight up, like, got a bonus, right? Like an explosive arrow. Just straight up got a 5% ailment modifier on it. Crazy. Just a straight up winner, right? Straight up winner. But that doesn't mean that, like, you know, damage over time or poison concoction got nerfed, by the way, guys. Like, poison concoction didn't even get touched. Wintertide brand didn't get touched. Like, a lot of these skills that I've been playing really didn't get touched. You know what I mean? So like if it was a good league starter before, an okay one, it'll still work now. So I don't know why people are like, there's not a lot of people, but I do see a lot of negativity saying, oh man, you know, like what's the point of this? There are definitely winners and losers. That's every single patch note, guys. That is every single patch note. A lot of stuff is going to remain the same. So some people are saying they're going to be like crazy far ahead. You may have gotten a 3 or 4% numerical, you know, buff here and there. I do believe there's a lot more dependence on gear. It's just the thing I want to keep reiterating. Without gear, some of these changes really don't take good effects. So it kind of hurts our budget a little bit. But more variety in the early game, so there's a lot more skills that are viable and going to be better for leveling, which is something I've asked for a while. So technically, I'm really happy with that because it does give you variety. The trouble is obviously, wouldn't I just be better off still playing those old skills because some of them don't need to transition into better builds and scale better with less gear. So just keep that in mind. Right, guys, that's the take home I want to say. Not all doom and gloom. There are a bunch of winners and losers. There's a bunch of stuff I didn't touch on, you know, which is like build specific and stuff like that. I just wanted to mention what it means for you guys in the broader picture, as in like, you know, you do need some of this on gear. Just be aware of that. Things like Poison Concoction haven't got touched yet. I'm hoping to see Seismic Trap and DD obviously addressed as well. If they're still alive, by the way, guys, that means that the issue isn't resolved and you will still have a better league start with DD than you would some of these new hit skills. Because the hit skills are not getting like much more powerful and they still have the problem of mobility in the end game, right? So like, just by comparison, you're probably going to want to swap to the old versions anyway. Just wanted to bring that out there. If you want to play hit skills though, now you can. Remember this, guys, you can. It's not always the best choice. If you like this take, if you like just a more general, broad approach instead of going through every little nuance and, you know, like finicky part where I talk about my builds, this, that, the other, you know, it is what it is, guys. If you like what I'm saying, you know, like, subscribe, all that jazz, guys. If not, peace out. I'll catch you all later. Laters.